Hey guys, my name is Matt Johnson, and today I want to talk to you about my video exporting settings that I use whenever I'm rendering my videos out from Premiere Pro. And I realize that's a really basic topic that a lot of you guys are like either watching this on YouTube or Vimeo, so you're like, I already make videos, I know how to do this, why are you talking about this? But if you go to my website, whoismatt.com, the two most popular posts that I've ever written, the first is about my exporting settings for YouTube. The other is about my exporting settings for Instagram. And there's like hundreds of people out there that have been looking for this every day. And I realized that I had not made videos for either of these topics. And I'm like, man, I really need to do this. This is important. So today, this video is the first in a series of 3 videos all about my export settings. And I'm sure you're like, really, Matt, you need to make 3 videos. Does that really need to happen? But hear me out, okay? This is important. This video is going to be all about exporting in 4K. So exporting videos to YouTube and Vimeo and Facebook and other sites that can support 4K. It's also about delivering 4K to your clients, which is also very important because on YouTube or Vimeo, you may want to upload a much higher quality video file than you would necessarily give to a client. You don't need to be given like a 10 gig video file and then be like, why is it so big? What have you done to me? So there is a difference in size depending on where you are sending the video. So I want to make sure we talk about that. But if you get bored of me talking and you don't want to listen to me ramble about video settings and why I choose them and the point of them, in the description of this video right down below, there's going to be a link to a blog post detailing all of my export settings. So if you just don't want to watch this, you can go down there and click on that and read. But if you're still sticking around, I would love to talk to you about exporting 4K video and hop right into Premiere right now. Welcome to Adobe Premiere Pro 2017. I'll go to the help page here, go to the about page, so you can see that I'm using version 2017.0.2. Just so you are aware of whenever you are editing on your own version of the software. Now, as you can see, I already have a project opened up, and I have one video clip imported, which is from a family cruise vacation that we took here. It's pretty cool, and you'll see that it is a 4K video clip. Now, before we go and render it, we need to talk about sequences, because ideally, whenever you are recording a video and editing it and then exporting it, you want all the settings to remain the same throughout. So you want to shoot with certain camera settings, then you want to edit with the same camera settings, then you want to export with the same camera settings. So that way everything is smooth throughout the video. So let's create a new sequence that matches our 4K video footage. You can either press Control-N to open up the new sequence dialog box, or you can go to File, New Sequence. And that's going to open up the new sequence dialog box. You have a lot of presets in here. Generally, I use the digital SLR preset, but you'll notice that it does not have an option for 4K. You have 1080p, 480p, 720p, no 4K. So we need to create one of our own. So let's select 1080p, and we're going to select 1080p 24 because we shot our video at 24 frames per second, or 23.976, same thing. Then you're going to select the settings box at the top. This is the preset page for the DSLR 1080p preset, and we only need to change one thing to make it work with 4K, and that is the frame size. So we're going to change the horizontal to 3840, and we're going to change the vertical to 2160. Everything else can remain the same. Your pixel aspect ratio is going to remain the same because I've used that for every single DSLR mirrorless I've ever used has been 1.0. Fields, you're shooting progressive already, so you're going to leave that. Audio settings, your sample rate is 48,000 hertz on pretty much all DSLRs and mirrorless I've ever used. If your camera is recording with a different hertz, change it to the hertz that it's using. Video previews, you do not need to change any of this. Your width can be 1920, your height can be 1080 because this is just the preview. Your maximum bit depth and maximum render quality also do not need to be checked because this is just for video previews. Now, if you are, say, shooting with a 10-bit camera, such as an FS7 or a Red or a Blackmagic, and you have shot in 10-bit, then you should definitely check the maximum bit depth box here because that is going to give you visual previews of your 10-bit footage. And you're going to want to be able to see that whenever you're editing and color grading, so that should definitely be selected. As you can see, it'll give you some warning about your memory status and stuff like that. Make sure you have enough memory if you're doing this. For now, because I'm shooting with the A7S II and it is only 8-bit, I do not need to have maximum bit depth or maximum render quality checked. We will check maximum render quality whenever we are rendering the video, but because it's just the preview, we do not need to do that. Lastly, there's composite and linear color. It's checked on my computer because I am using GPU acceleration. If you do not have a GPU to accelerate your video rendering, this may not be checked or available. I would not worry about it either way at this point because the only thing this affects is whenever it's compositing certain effects, and it'll affect fades in certain ways and things like that, but it's very obscure and you probably will not notice it. Google it if you want to know more. I don't want to get into it right now because I want to talk about video rendering. Lastly, this VR properties, we're not shooting in VR. This isn't VR. I wish it was. It'd be super cool, but it's not. So lastly, you're going to click Save Preset, and let's call it 3840 x 2160 23.976. So that way you know the resolution and the frame rate, and that's about all that you need to know. So we're going to click OK, and it's going to repopulate the sequence preset list, and there it is. And you'll see that I already had one. These are both the same, so we'll just select the one that I already had. These are both the exact same preset though. Now we're going to name the sequence. We'll call this 4K export settings. And we're going to click enter, and it's going to create our new sequence. Now let's take our video clip and we're going to drag it down to the sequence. Right here at the beginning is fine. And there it is. Man, that's looking pretty. Look at that beautiful palm tree footage. Wow. Now that the video clip is down on our timeline, let's pretend that we've already edited this fully. It's a fully edited video and we're ready to render it. So now we need to set our in and our out points, which is very helpful if, say, you're starting your video over here and you don't want to have a bunch of blank space in front of your video. I do this in the event that I ever need to add something to the beginning. I have a little bit of wiggle room to do that without needing to shuffle everything over. So let's go to the start of our video clip and we're going to tap I on the keyboard, and that's going to cause a new bar to appear at the top that is our in point. And we want that right at the start of our video whenever you want to start. Then we're going to go to the end of our video, right to the last frame, roughly here, it's fine. And we're going to tap O, and that is going to be our out point. And that is now our entire video from beginning to end as it will be rendered. Next, let's render it. We can either press Control M to bring up the render menu, or we can go to File, Export Media. Either one of those are going to bring up the export settings dialog box where we change our settings to render our video. Now here's where things get interesting, because I'm going to share with you two different export preset settings. One of them is going to be if you're exporting to YouTube or Facebook or Vimeo, and in which case you're going to have a very, very large video file. The other one is if you are going to be exporting to give to a client, at which point you don't want to give them just some massive video file where they're like, this is crazy, why'd you give me something this big? Ideally, you want something to look best for both streaming video sites and for a client, so that's why there are two different presets for that. Now let's talk about the video preset that I use whenever I'm exporting to YouTube or Vimeo or to other video sharing sites. And first, I want you to think about how your video looks right after you render it. Whenever you play it back for the first time and you're like, this looks so beautiful, oh my gosh, this is amazing, this is a gorgeous thing, I can't wait to share this. And then you upload it to YouTube and you play it back and you're like, why does this look not so good? Why is it all compressed? Why is there artifacts? What is wrong with this thing? Why is the video not looking as good as it did on my computer? The reason is because of a little thing called compression, which all of these video sites do because they want to transform your video into multiple different formats that can be played on computers and laptops and tablets and everything else. And for them to do that, they're going to take your beautiful, pristine video file and they're going to crush it down into a really small size. And you're going to be like, my beautiful work, it's gone. So to combat that and to get around that, we can use a very high resolution, very high bitrate file whenever we first upload to YouTube. And that is going to result in the compressed versions that YouTube made also being very high quality because they're losing less data as they're compressed more and more. The only drawback of this is that the file size is very large, and you're not going to run into an issue with this for YouTube. As long as you have a fast internet connection, you can just upload away and enjoy it. But if you are on Vimeo, Vimeo has upload limits. If you are a free user, you can upload 500 megabytes a week. If you're a Plus user, you can upload 5 gigabytes a week, and Pro users can upload 20 gigabytes a week, which sounds like a lot until you're dealing with very high resolution 4K footage. The free and the Plus plans are pretty laughable for how big of files you may be dealing with uploading. For now, that is just something that I want you to be aware of if you are exporting in 4K for Vimeo. Onward now to the video preset settings that we're going to use for all the video sites. First, format. You're going to select H.264, which is already selected here, which is great. Next, for preset, you're going to go to custom because we want to totally customize something from the ground up and make it our own. Next, you're going to select an output name and location for where you want to save your video file. Always make sure you do that, and make sure you have the export video and export audio boxes checked, because I have done it before where I didn't have the export audio button checked and I rendered my entire video and realized, oh, there's no sound. This has happened multiple times, so make sure you got that. Next, you have the summary section, which is very helpful if you do not remember your sequence settings. They are there right there for you if you need them. Below that, you have effects, video, audio, multiplexer, captions, and publish. The only two things that you need to worry about are video and audio. The rest of this is not important, which is really great. Now let's talk about basic video settings. Before you start messing with width and height and everything else, you need to go down to Profile and make sure that is set to high. The H.264 video encoding format offers 3 different profiles. There is baseline, main, and high. Baseline was made for like early cell phones. Main was made for general usage, and high was for high performance. Basically, think of the profile as the engine that is running the encoding, and between baseline, main, or high, you always want to select high, because high is going to be using all of the best encoding presets and all the bells and whistles, as they call it, for your rendering. So you want to make sure that high is selected. Next is level. And you can think of level as a preset for different encoding resolutions and frame rates. For example, if you were to select only level 3.2, the maximum resolution of your video would be 1280 by 720, which we will enter here. And you'll notice that it fills it up. But if I wanted to say, try to make it bigger, if I want to do 1920, and I hit enter, it's going to say invalid frame size for this level. Please lower the video bounds or increase the profile and level. So what we need to do whenever we do that is that we need to make sure that we are selecting the level that is appropriate for the video that we are currently rendering. In this case, we are using the highest level, 5.2, because we are at the upper limits of what H.264 as a video codec can handle. And that is going to bring up 3840 by 2160, which is the same as our source settings and is the same as what we shot. So that is what we want for our width and our height of our video. You'll notice though that it also changed the frame rate, which is grayed out to 59.94, which is not what our source is. So we need to uncheck this little box here, and we need to select 23.976. Field order can stay the same, that's fine. Aspect, make sure it's square pixels 1.0, just like it was in our sequence that we created. Leave the profile and level as it is, because now that's all done. Last, in the basic video settings, we're going to check the render maximum depth box. And the reason that you want to do that is, as it says here, it improves the video's quality. Namely, this is very helpful in high contrast scenes. If you have, say, a blue sky and you don't want to get the gradient issues and banding, checking the render at maximum depth box will help with that. So make sure that is checked. Next, let's move on to bitrate settings, which is definitely some of the most confusing but most important part of your video render. You'll notice here that you have 3 bitrate encoding options. You have CBR, VBR1 pass, and VBR2 pass. Now, what exactly is bitrate encoding and bitrate in general for that matter? Now, I'm gonna massively oversimplify this here, but I'm gonna say that it has to do with a lot of math and compression. And you're probably thinking, well, Matt, why would I want to compress my video? I want it in the highest quality possible. No, you don't, because that is going to result in like, why is my video a terabyte in size? This is insane. You don't want that. You want some compression, but you want good compression. So we want to use good compression to compress our video so it looks as good as possible. Now, what is good compression? Good compression is mixing a high bit rate with a high resolution video file. Ideally, they will work together very well. Where this falls apart is if you have too low of a bit rate and a high resolution video, the bit rate and the encoder is not able to keep up with all the stuff happening in the video frame, and you get artifacts. A good example of this occurring is if you have a high resolution video with a lot of fast moving objects. One place I see it happen a lot is in tree leaves. If you are filming tree leaves and they're all moving at once, the video encoder will freak out and be unable to render it properly, and you have all these artifacts. So to avoid that, you need to have an even higher bit rate to compensate. Let's jump right into our bitrate settings and start changing them. So first, we're going to go to bitrate encoding, and we're going to select CBR, which stands for constant bitrate, which means that no matter what is happening on the screen, the encoder is going to be throwing the same amount of data at it. In this case right now, the target bitrate is 17 megabits per second, which for 4K video is not nearly enough, even if you were just going to be watching it on your computer screen, because the resolution is so high. So we need to increase the bit rate so that it is looking flawless no matter what is happening in our video. The issue that we need to come back to though is because we're uploading to YouTube, whatever we render it out as is still going to be compressed down to a smaller format. So to combat that, I would recommend setting your target bitrate to a very high level. And what I set mine to is 100 megabits per second, which you are like, oh my gosh, Matt, that is huge. This is crazy, which it's not that crazy. But the benefit of it is that no matter what is happening in your video, no matter how many leaves or how many fast moving things are happening, the bitrate is going to be more than able to handle it. And more importantly, whenever you upload it to YouTube or Vimeo, they are going to compress it down, but because the bitrate is so high, they are going to compress it into a video that looks very good that still doesn't have any of those compression artifacts. This is my secret for how I upload really good videos, with the only cost being space on my computer and upload time, which if you have a fast internet connection like I do and a lot of video space, that's really not an issue. Incidentally, depending on the length of your video, you may begin running over Vimeo's upload limit with this high of a bitrate, so feel free to adjust it down to 80 or 60 as you need to make sure that your video fits into the upload size requirements for Vimeo. You don't really have to worry about that for YouTube though, because it does offer unlimited upload space. Next, we can ignore everything else. We don't need to worry about keyframe distance, and the video is not VR as we did in the Sequence 2, unfortunately. What you do want to check down here is use maximum render quality, which as you can see here, it says it gives you better quality scaling but increases the encode time. So if you are rendering a video and some of your footage is 4K but some of it's 1080p and you've scaled it up to 4K or scaled the 4K down to 1080p, using maximum render quality can definitely improve the quality of the scaling. So make sure you have that checked. I have it just checked by default because I'm always using mixed resolution projects, so it's easier for me just to leave it checked. Audio settings. On to audio here. This is really quick and easy. Audio format, you're going to want AAC. Audio codec is AAC. Sample rate needs to be 48,000 Hertz, which should match your camera and audio recorder. Audio quality, dub, that needs to be high. I don't know why you would want it to be anything else other than high. Leave it at high. Your bit rate should be at the max at 320, and you should give precedence to the bit rate, not the sample rate, so that way it is rendering the audio at the highest quality possible. Lastly, we're going to save our preset. So we're going to go up here to the little down arrow, we're going to click Save Preset, and we're going to name it CBR 100 Mbps 3840 x 2160 23.976. So that way you can know that it's constant bit rate at 100 megabits per second, your resolution, and your frame rate, which is really all that you're going to need to know whenever you're selecting a preset. Click OK, and that's going to be saved. And at this point, you can go on ahead and click Queue or export your video and render it, and there you go. But now we need to talk about if you are rendering your video for a client, because having 100 megabits bitrate in CBR is great if you are wanting to upload to YouTube, but if you are giving a video to a client, they may not be interested in getting the 10 gigabyte video file, and they're like, why is this so big? I'm not going to be uploading it. And because you're not going to be dealing with compression, you don't really need to be worrying about using CBR or VBR, especially if you're just giving it to them on a flash drive for them to watch. So in the case of giving the video to a client, we're going to go down here to video settings, we're going to go to bitrate encoding, and we're going to select VBR 2-pass. Now we need to talk about VBR 2-pass and VBR 1-pass. VBR 1-pass means that whenever the encoder goes through your video file and is choosing the bitrate for the specific scene, it is just going to be guessing. And it's like, okay, this looks like it's more important, we should give it more data, lower data, higher data, done. And it's actually a pretty quick way to render your video. The drawback of this is that it can be a little inefficient because it doesn't know quite how much data to use, and so sometimes it's using a little bit more than it needs, and sometimes using a little less, so you can have quality issues. VBR 2-pass, on the other hand, goes through the video twice. Yes, that does mean that it takes twice as long to render, but it can result in a much better video quality. Because the first pass, it goes through the video and it measures how much data it's going to need. So it says, okay, boring scene, this is fine. Ooh, leave scene. Okay, well, we're going to need to increase the data rate a lot. Okay, back down to boring scene, we don't need to worry about it. Then the second pass comes in and it renders the video at the data rate that the first pass recommended. So by doing that, you end up with a very efficient video file that is the optimal size while remaining the optimal quality. This is a really nice balance. And if you are not uploading to YouTube or Vimeo, I would definitely recommend using VBR 2-pass if you're giving your video to your clients. What you need to consider whenever you are encoding in VBR is the target bitrate and the maximum bitrate. You notice how in CBR we only had target bitrate, but now we have maximum bitrate as well. Because the target bitrate is going to be the average bitrate that you want your video to be at, and the maximum bitrate is the overhead that you give it if you're like, oh man, I know there may be some really intense scenes here, so I want to make sure that you have enough data that you don't break down and get artifacty on me. Now, to determine the best target bitrate and maximum bitrate for your video file, I would recommend going to YouTube and to their help page where they have their recommend upload encoding settings. And if you look over here under bitrate, it's saying that for 4K, the video bitrate should be 35 to 45 megabits per second. If it's higher frame rate, it should be higher, but for what we're shooting, 35 to 45. So let's go over here to our target and let's set it to 40. And we're going to set our maximum here to 60. So that'll give us a nice average bit rate, but give us some room if things start to get a little crazy. What I want you to notice is that whenever we went to VBR and we dropped the target bit rate, the estimated file size down here dropped considerably. So if you are looking at CBR here and you have it set to 100, suddenly your estimated file size is 254 megabytes, which is huge for this little file that's only 21 seconds long. If you look over here at VBR 2-pass and we drop it down to 40 and 60, then suddenly our estimated file size is only 102 megabytes. So it is a significantly smaller file size, and it's still going to look great in 4K. So if you are delivering to clients in particular, I would highly recommend using VBR2Pass with these encoding settings. And if you are uploading to YouTube or Vimeo or to Facebook or to any other video sharing site where they use a lot of compression, CBR at 100 megabits per second. Otherwise, if you're delivering to clients here, you can leave all of your settings the exact same as they were as if you were uploading to YouTube or Vimeo, and you can go ahead and click Queue or Export and export your video. That's it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this video has given you some insight into how you can export your videos in awesome 4K resolution. And if you already know how to do that, I hope at the very least that I was entertaining to you. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave one below or get in touch with me through my website, whoismatt.com. And if you liked this video, I would love it if you would give it a like. And if you are interested in seeing more filmmaking tutorials like this in the future, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. And lastly, if you want to check out my wedding film production company, Filmstrong Productions, it's at filmstrong.com. Thanks and have a great day.